There's only been one DPS that was removed from the category completely, and that's Doomfist. Between the crazy buffs, nerfs, and reworks, Doomfist has gone through it all. July 7th, 2017, Doomfist was released into Overwatch 2 for the first time. Now, Doomfist was incredibly unique compared to any other hero that we have ever seen. A close quarters fight game character that had no way to do long, consistent damage and had multiple different types of mobility abilities that allowed him to scale the map like crazy. Combine that together with health that you get from dealing damage with your abilities, the ability to combo and one-shot, and you have something akin to a fighting game character in an FPS game. Now, DPS Doomfist was a lot different than he is today. First off, he had a ton of abilities that when combined together or even used singularly, he could one-shot. If he slammed, his slam would have a charge-up counter, and if it reached a high enough number, and then you uppercutted afterwards, followed up with your primary fire, you could effectively insta-kill people from out of nowhere if they didn't deny you or they didn't expect you. In addition to that, a fully charged punch would one-shot squishies up against a wall, so you could drop from the high ground, punch someone into the wall, insta-kill them, and then use the rest of your abilities to escape. There was a certain cycle of Doomfist, a punch into uppercut slam away, or a slam into uppercut punch away was typically the cycle that you would use, and ultimate was used very similar to how it was today because it would reset your cooldowns, but it actually did damage, so you could get pretty consistent kills with it if you used it on top of squishies. On top of all of this, there was a lot of pioneers of rollouts on this hero. If you could get into a crevice of the map on the high ground, or if you could navigate over rooftops, you could get yourself in a position where you could hypothetically one-shot a character, kill them, and get away before they expect you at all. And while incorporating rollouts was definitely hit or miss, they were very unexpected, so as you were pioneering them, no one knew how to play around it, or no one did consistently, and it increased a ton of interest in Doomfist as a character that had a lot of rollout depth in addition to tech depth, which was something that was being discovered. Certain techniques within Doomfist, the ability to bounce off of certain rocks with your punch or slide down on certain ledges, and the combination of all of this plus your innate abilities just meant Doomfist had a crazy amount of combos potential and a massively high skill ceiling. However, there was the problem for Doomfist and his inevitable fate. The thing you've got to understand about Doom in particular is that he was probably one of the most hated characters that you could possibly imagine. Because he had the ability to CC or crowd control people multiple times, and back then tanks didn't have any CC denial, you could punch a tank, uppercut a tank, and basically make them a damn ragdoll. This means that the population of tank players really disliked DPS Doom, and that wasn't it, because supports hated him even more. One of the things about Doomfist is that he was ultimately countered by coordination. He had to get in close, he had to set up his engagements, and that could be interrupted in a very simple way, as long as multiple people were looking out for each other, peeling for each other, and focusing Doomfist at the same time. That Doomfist would probably feed and not get that much value. But in ranked, you tell me, do your teammates do all those things to help you as a support? Probably not, and they did it even less back then. This means that for a lot of people, a Doomfist felt like an unstoppable monster that would fly in out of nowhere, one-shot you, and fly away with you having no counterplay. And while that was most likely not true, it doesn't even matter what's true or not, it just mattered about community perception. And the community perception for every single person, honestly, besides the Doom player himself, was that this character was miserable to play against, especially a good Doomfist. Now, Doomfist was never that dominant in pro play, seeing spikes here and there in certain metas centered around double shield, or Doomfist could go in and one-shot a character even in spite of the shield, or it was actually played in metas like Tankfist, with a Sombra, a Zarya, and a Doomfist to get bubbled in after Sombra goes in and hacks a very vulnerable target. But most of the time, Doomfist metas were fairly niche, because a lot of the reasons why Doomfist did get value in the chaotic nature of ranked, he would not get value against the coordinated nature of pro players that knew how to counter him. Now, unfortunately, Doomfist has always had one particular problem, and this is the bug problem on Doomfist, and with DPS Doom, it was probably worse than ever. Huge inconsistencies between things that do work and things that don't work. Sometimes they would work on higher or lower ping. Sometimes they would work one patch and then not work the next. And small bugs on this character could actually have huge effects over the type of techniques you could incorporate, the plays that you can make, or overall actually were buffs and nerfs to the character that happened all the time. And it was very confusing because Blizzard didn't actually really know if something was going to be a bug or something was going to be a feature. Because honestly, a lot of techs that they used back on Doomfist seem like they didn't put them in intentionally at all, so that would kind of be a bug, but they kept them in, so it's a little inconsistent, to say the least. Now, due to the bubbling frustrations around Doomfist, the CC conversation happened, where a lot of players said that CC was too much in Overwatch. There was too much crowd control, too many stuns, and this led to a lot of the big changes that we see in Overwatch 2. The tank passive that gives them anti-CC resistance that they just primarily gave to Reinhardt back in Overwatch 1, and also the removal of CC from the DPS roster for the most part, which led to things like getting rid of Cassidy's stun grenade, but also left Doomfist in a very weird spot, because Doomfist was a character that had many ways to crowd control an enemy, so his kit no longer worked in the DPS category if they were going to remove it. So what did they do? April 26, 2022, Tankfist was born. Now, his entire existence is incredibly controversial. Most players actually prefer DPS Doomfist. That's the character they fell in love with, and they feel like their favorite character got deleted for something that's a shell of his former self. In addition to that, it still felt very difficult for the Overwatch team to balance Doomfist properly, even as a tank. Not only is there a clear divide between the people that can play Doomfist well and the people that can't, but also Doomfist has the same bug problem that he had before, where some of his abilities seem like they're intentional and some of the abilities are not, and sometimes things work right and sometimes they don't. And one of the things that many people complain about to this day is that beta tank Doomfist had many techs that were removed because I guess Blizzard saw them as bugs, even though the Doomfist mains at the time saw them as techs. So what is it? Bugs, techs? It's very hard to figure out exactly what is in Doomfist kit when things are breaking, not working, being added or removed at any given time. And regardless of his power level, Doomfist in Overwatch 2 doesn't feel like the monster that Doomfist in Overwatch 1 felt. The idea that a character like Doomfist, one of the big baddies in the lore, a character that has a giant freaking Hellboy-style fist, is actually supposed to be threatening. And there could be an argument that Overwatch 2 tank Doomfist is better for the game overall, but you cannot argue that Doomfist of today is nowhere near as threatening as Doomfist once was.